Pastor David McGregor is going to come and share the word. Why don't you come on up, David, and let's make him welcome. We will tell you a little bit of our story. My old good friend, Jay Schwab, Josiah's dad, when I first met him and we started building a relationship, he would always tell me, I love you in the Lord, but I'm learning to love you as a friend. And that's kind of how our journey's been. When I first met you, I was like, when we had a Zoom call, we were talking via the internet, and I got off the phone or off the computer, and I went in, and I was just like, I like that guy. And so it was kind of a weird thing. So I wanted David to come up, and we were just going to just dialogue a little bit and tell you about our journey, because it's kind of interesting how he got here. And I want you to see the hand of God of how all of this was orchestrated to get him here to this point. And then he's going to share about what they're here to do. See on the shirt, Go Family Ministries. They're planting a brand new, basically, missions organization that's going to be here on the ground doing some amazing things. And part of what we're doing as a church, as you know, our theme for this year is multiply. And one of the areas that we're going to begin to multiply, I feel like we're pretty good at community internally, which is one of our core values. But we haven't done the best job of out community. And we said, life is easier when you're in community. You can handle much more in the tough times, and you can celebrate more in the good times when you're in community. And there are lots of people outside of these doors that don't have community to do that with. They don't have, especially people to share the struggle. And so as we move forward this year, and you're going to hear what David and Heather are doing, they're going to become basically the outreach arm of Everyday Church and the things that we're going to be doing to get involved in the community.
I think they were supposed to cheer when you said that part.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I don't know if you guys know this, but people will answer help wanted ads in churches. And so I learned this. And so on a few websites, Assemblies of God, Church of God, people that are connected with us, just not relationally, but doctrinally, we're just running an ad like, hey, we're looking for a youth pastor. We're a church plant. We don't have anything to offer you other than experience. Would you come? Whatever. So we did that for kids ministry because, Katie, my wife, if you don't know her, my wife usually does kids ministry. She's been doing that for about 8 or 9 months. And so David responded to that ad. At the time was living in Tennessee, but I didn't know he was living in Tennessee. And so we started this dialogue. He sent me an email and just said, hey, we're planning on coming to Florida. We don't know where. And we're going to start this outreach thing, but we don't know if would it be a conflict of interest of us having our own outreach yet working at a church. What would you think about that? And I was like, no, there wouldn't be a conflict of interest at all. But what he didn't know was I had met with 3 separate people off in lunch meetings and different things before he responded. We were talking about how do we take what we're doing and be more community oriented outside the doors. So I'd had 3 separate meetings with 3 separate people, unrelated. This was already stirring in my heart. It was stirring so much in my heart that the theme for the year, instead of multiply, was almost community. And but I felt like multiply was a better umbrella, that community could come underneath that. And so he sent me that email. I don't know if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, essentially the email, and we had been feeling this for a few months, thought it might be like a year or 2 down the road before we actually moved. And then at the beginning of the year, kind of a little backstory, we'd been at our church for about 7 years. We've been in ministry for 22 years. We've youth, children's, we planted a church, pastored that for 7 years. We've done a lot of mission work. And then every year I begin praying at the beginning of the year, God, what's the kind of like that word? What's the word for my ministry this year? And just kind of started being kind of convicted of comfort. And so we started one day just kind of talking back and forth, Heather and I, and of potential, we feel like God may be stirring us up to do something. We thought it might be a year or 2 down the road. But then he spoke a word to me one day, and it was quickly. And we didn't know it would be this quick, We thought, well, maybe instead of a year to 2 years, maybe it'll be, a year. But then we just kind of situationally and just through listening to his voice, we just felt like it was time to start pursuing some I guess, leads or whatever, and saw the ad, sent the email to them, and there was a reason. You know, I'm not going to share today why I asked that, but and I didn't tell them this. We had a couple interviews. I had one over in Orlando, and it was for a paid position, but just didn't really feel like that was the one. This is before we moved here. So we just kind of right off the bat, we felt like Bellevue we're like, well, you know, we might go to church there, but we may live a little close to Orlando and drive. You know, if any of y'all have ever been to Tennessee, to like the Gatlinburg area, you know it is packed full of tourists, and it takes forever to get any place. So we were just used to driving. So we were thinking, even if we need to live 45 minutes away, we're just go, because, you know, this just seems like, you know, cool church. We didn't know the truth. That it's a really cool church. But so anyways, I did a lot of digging, you know, because I saw Everyday Church. I'm like, you know, that's a cool name. Did a lot of digging before I sent the email to Pastor Randy to ask about, you know, the question I asked him. And, you know, found some YouTube videos. And I remember one of the conversations you said, you like, you must have really did some digging if you found that. But, you know, I would call Heather over, like, oh, you know, come over and look at this. And, you know, so we watched a lot of videos, and we just did a lot of praying, and then we connected.
Yeah, so he sent the email. We set up a Zoom call. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically Skype or whatever. So we're having a video phone call. But in the meantime, as you know, as I started the series Multiply, that was birthed out of a word that God spoke to me when I went to a conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. So Katie and I were planning on taking a couple of extra days after the conference just to seek God for the new year. And I didn't want to go to Gatlinburg because he and I are really from the same area. Like, he ran in the same town that I grew up in, was born in. It's kind of weird. And so, but I didn't want to go to Gatlinburg because I've been there a lot of times. I wanted to go to a cabin in North Carolina. I was looking everywhere. North Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. I looked everywhere but Tennessee because I didn't want to go to Tennessee. And the only place I could find that was affordable was in Tennessee. And I was like, I don't want to go to Tennessee. And I still haven't connected with him yet. And so we booked this thing, and it was very close to time. And in October is peak season for mountains.
Yeah. You don't get reservations in anywhere near Gatlinburg in October. Close to it.
Yeah. So we were just a few weeks out trying to book this. And so I booked this place. I was like, okay, this is it. It's the only place that's affordable. We're going. And then I connect with him. And they live in Sevierville, which is like 15 minutes from where we're going to be staying. And I was like, there's no way a church our size and with our budget, like sometimes when you're interviewing people to come be a part of your team, like if you're big time, you'll fly them in, you'll drive them in, you want to pay for their expenses, you'll have interviews to let them spend the weekend. There's no way we could have done that for this family. But yet, before I even met him, every other door of every place I wanted to go closed, and the only place open was 15 minutes from him. And so we had this Zoom meeting, and I was like, hey, are you guys down for doing dinner while we're up there? And so we were able to have
You hadn't seen me yet. Otherwise, you're down for dinner. Let's meet.
And so we picked this local place there, and we were able to spend a couple hours together there in Gatlinburg, which to me was just like, okay. So Kate and I are just like, if this guy moves here, this is unbelievable. That he would find us on the internet, God would orchestrate this meeting, and then they would move to Bellevue. Like, that's just not, what are the chances of this happening? And so he was like, yeah, we feel good about it or whatever. And we just kept having some dialogue. And then next thing you know, like 6 weeks later, they were here. So it was kind of
quickly
a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind.
Yeah, it definitely was. And we kind of had that same thing. The night that they got there, we had already had a camping. And this is one of the reasons we were comfortable. We had a program at our church called Trail Life USA, which is like a Christian version of Scouts. And we already had one of our many camping trips up in the mountains. So Heather came over and met us. I came down out of the mountains and met him, and I was wearing my camo hat, looking kind of, but he still talked to me. But I got to throw this in real quick. You said the crud earlier, and in Tennessee we say they're creeping crud. So anyways. But yeah, we sat down, and it was kind of the same thing. We talked to him, and I don't know how many times during that conversation, and even after that, both of us would use the phrase, I don't know, but that's okay. And that was kind of our whole thing was, we really don't know. We moved down here, got a camper, and everybody's like, oh, where are you going to live at? We're like, I don't know, but that's okay because God said to do it. But yeah, we walked out of there, and it was cold. It was a cold night. And, we said our goodbyes and stuff, and Heather walked over to get her van before I went and got in the church van to go back. And I don't remember the exact words, but, we just knew. We're like, these people are real, because, we've been in ministry for 22 years, and you've been in ministry for a long time, and you don't always meet people, and I'm not saying everybody's fake, but sometimes you meet people, they're kind of guarded, they're not as authentic right up front. And just sitting there eating barbecue with this guy, I'm like, this dude's real, and we've just felt peace, and we just knew this is where we should be at. So we packed up a moving truck, and it was packed full, but we got here. And
yeah, so they came down, and again, he was searching the areas. He'll tell you more about what they're doing. Thought they would live farther away. And I remember having a conversation. I was like, listen, we're for you guys no matter what, whether you're part of our church or not. We'll support you, and we want to be behind you. But realistically, I don't see how you can be a part of our inner working staff and live 45 minutes to an hour away. And they're like, oh, we love driving. All that. It's like, I'm just telling you, and I don't know if I said I'm just telling you, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, whatever.
You probably did. It seems like I've heard you say, yeah.
And
maybe
so,
it's just your facial expressions.
Probably. I don't hide it because I'm so real. I just don't hide it. People are like, you okay? Anyway, and so they just started this looking around process, and we gave them time. We didn't make any big announcements. We just let them come, acclimate to the church. And they just began to love the church, love the people. And the next thing I know, they're looking for houses here, saying, we're no longer looking for somewhere far away to commute. We're filtering everything through Everyday Church. And so they found a house in Summerfield, and
we're like 12 minutes away.
Yeah, they're here. And so anyway, take it away. I just wanted to give you some backstory of how this whole thing came to be and how crazy it really was. I think only God could have orchestrated that moment. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so take it away, Pastor David. We're happy to hear you today.
All right, well, thank you. I know Miss Katie's not here this morning, but praying she gets feeling better. But they're just such an awesome couple, and we are blessed as a church. We can say we now because we're here to stay. We can't get rid of us. But we have been blessed with an awesome pastors, and then just getting to know everybody in the church. And I'll give my story here in a second. But I just want to say thank you. One of the things moving from Tennessee, you always hear about Southern hospitality, and both of my parents were from Kentucky, so I learned how to eat right, how to act right, and learn manners, how to treat people, just all that good stuff. But we were afraid because we had been to Florida a lot. We had never set foot in Marion County, never been. We always did, of course, Orlando. In the Atlantic coast. So one time as a teenager, we went to Tampa. I think we were just there one night. So we had never really had been here. But we just did a lot of praying, and I have a picture on my phone where we kind of did this big circle, big oval of an area where we felt like God was potentially leading us. And so we're here, but once again, just thank you. And everybody has just made us feel so welcome. We have felt the hospitality, and I don't know if you know or not, but that's biblical. The Bible says, practice hospitality. So thank you all for practicing hospitality and just making us feel welcome. Mr. Carmen, Miss Becky for inviting us over for Thanksgiving and feeding us, and they're just like awesome people. So thank you, everybody. So real quickly, I do have if I got time, I do have a short little message. I don't know how we're doing time-wise. I don't know if it matters or not. But anyways, what we're doing with Go Family Ministries, I mentioned we were in a very comfortable position. We had an amazing team in our children's ministry. When we took it over, I think we had about 3. God blessed us. And we got, this past summer, we did our own kids camp, and we ended up, we had about 24 people that ended up being involved with our children's ministry. So we were in a comfortable position. If we wanted to do something, we were able to do it. We had, awesome programs there. We could look out and see the Smoky Mountains. We'd always say, 10 million people come here every year for vacation, and we get to live here. So it was a comfortable position. Well, then, as I mentioned, started praying. God started convicting me of my comfort. And it was, don't get me wrong, God will make us comfortable. I believe that, He'll give us peace and contentment when we're in the middle of His will. But sometimes we need a little stirring when we begin to rely on that comfort maybe instead of relying on God. But we started praying. My wife is a travel agent. That's not a plug for business, but if you are traveling, hook up with her. Her work life revolves around Disney. I mean, she can book anywhere in the world, cruises, anything, but 98% of it's Disney. I mean, it's just a huge, huge percentage of it's Disney. So we always hear about that. But we knew Florida was the place God was leading us. And the vision that He gave to us is not only is it just going to be a one just us, but to multiply, as Pastor Randy's been teaching. That would be something that would involve multiplication. I've always been involved with sports when I was younger, then in management. So I've always been involved with building teams, and God has blessed us, with the ability to build some pretty awesome teams over the years. So part of the vision of Go Family Ministries is to go into a community, and I'll use Belleview for an example. And what we're going to be doing here is going into an apartment complex. We're doing a site, we're calling it like a kids club, but we use the word go a lot, and I'll explain that. But it's kind of a peculiar name. People are like, Go Family Ministries. And the lady at the campground, she's like, oh, I get it, because you guys are always on the go, because she'd always see us in our van going back and forth and always leaving. She's like, I get it now, I get it. She said, the family on the go, that's what she always called it. But what we're going and we're do a sidewalk Sunday school. I don't know has anybody ever heard of sidewalk Sunday school before? But we're going, and originally we were envisioning like an enclosed trailer. Now we're praying if that's still I saw an ambulance. I thought it would be pretty cool. I have a lot of just vision for what things can be. But anyways, we're going to do a sidewalk Sunday school, which isn't anything new, but we're going to be adding kind of a couple different elements to that. Like if we go in, we're going do some games, do some music, but we're working on an app. It's really going to be an app-driven ministry to where we're not only are the kids learning, but then the parents that are standing around that may attend. But they can go home and there'll be access on an app to where there'll be family activities together. There's some different versions of the Bible where they can have access to a Bible, because believe it or not every house in this nation has a Bible in it. There would be reading plans, different things, games, activities. Then on the ministry side of it, for ministry teams, because like if we go into an apartment complex here in Bellevue, we want to establish ourselves, and the family, we want to create a family environment within that community. And let's say if Bob over here is an adult, maybe he doesn't know Christ, or he does know Christ. So either he comes to Christ or he knows him. He would eventually, by getting involved, become part of the family, but then eventually he could also even kind of be like a leader at that site because he lives there. And then and once a month or every so often, we'd have what we're going to call family dinner, where it's not just the kids, but the families and just anybody living in the apartments can come in and they can have the dinner. And it's not probably going to be anything real fancy, but cookout style, everybody sit down, and then kind of like the E-group, so where we start talking about God. Okay, so we're wanting to reach the kids. We're going to use technology to do that. And then also fostering and creating that family environment within that community. So we're going to multiply by, helping starting these in other areas. One of the vision that God had gave us, and it's on my, I'm always taking notes on my phone. I got I keep scrolling. I got so many. But one of the visions, one of the directions that He gave us was to help churches. So there may be a church. This is our church. We're not leaving, but there may be a church. Eventually where they're like, oh, we want to learn how to do it. So as a church, as a team from the church, we can go over and help them get one started too in the area that they're reaching. We believe this is eventually going to be a multi-county, multi-state throughout the nation. I even got some people overseas that's already starting to ask me questions about it. I have 2 Christian brothers from Africa that's been contacting me, a guy from India. So and we haven't really even put anything out there a whole lot. I mean, we have a real generic website. We're building the app, but there's already some traction going. So we see that God's going to be using this. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we'll be doing. A lot of the kids club, when we go there, it's going to be high energy, music, games, and a lesson. So anyways, that's just a summary. And so I don't know if, do I have time to share? Okay, good. All right, so this morning, and none of this was really planned, speaking was planned, but everything that we sung about this morning really tied in with, perfectly with, I think, what God's wanting to say today. So I jotted down a couple little notes while we were singing, and before I start on this, and I'll try to not go too long. Oh, it's only 11:10. You said I got to 1:30. But we sung a song today, and we sung about obedience. We sung about surrender. Ms. Dawn got up here. She talked about hearing the voice of God. We sung about Jehovah Jireh. And if you think about that story, the whole provision came through obedience. And really, obedience ties in with what I want to talk about today. Obedience ties in with multiplication. Because without obedience, we cannot multiply. So really, all this stuff really tied in really well together. And as we were singing that last song, I felt like God wanted me to and I don't know who this is for, but I want everybody to kind of listen for a moment, because I feel like God gave me a specific word for somebody. And that is that He's opening your ears to hear His voice. In fact, and then as I heard that, I also heard that by the end of the service today that He's going to speak to somebody specifically. And once again, I don't know who it is, but that He's going to be speaking to somebody about obedience and about going. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means getting involved with this outreach ministry or another part of the church, or what it means, but I just want to be obedient in sharing that with you, that God's saying that He's going to open your ears to hear His voice, and He's going to speak to you today. So anyways, let's pray, and then I want to get in the Word. Father, we thank You for this day today. Lord, we thank You that You are good and holy. Father, we thank You that You loved us so much, Lord, that You sent Jesus to die for us. That, Lord, even in our mess-ups and our imperfections, that You still love us, You still call us, You still want to use us. And Lord, we thank You and praise You for this word today. I pray that You let us hear the truth and reveal what You want us to hear today, see today, and learn today. We thank You in the wonderful, mighty name of Jesus. Amen. So I want to start out by sharing John chapter 1. I'm sure everybody's probably heard this before, but it's one of my favorite verses because it just talks about just who God is, who Jesus is. But for, John 1:1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And then I love it when you jump down to verse 14, it says, "And the Word became flesh and made His dwelling amongst us." So you think about that for a moment. Jesus is in his heavenly kingdom. He's in perfection. He's in the place where we all should strive to be someday. But yet, He becomes flesh and dwells amongst us. Think about that, and I know you've probably heard this before. Think about Jesus as a baby. He had to learn how to walk, and he would trip and fall and probably bump his head, and he lived life. So why, if the Word was in heaven, and this is something I know everybody knows the answer to, so this isn't some deep question that we won't know, but if the Word was in heaven, why did the Word have to come and be born in the flesh? That's something we all know, right? To die for our sins. And when we look at Luke 19:10, Jesus put it this way. He said, "The Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost." So I think that we can, without a whole lot of explanation and dwelling and spending a whole lot of time on this, that we can all agree that the reason that Jesus came, it was a very significant rescue mission. That the reason he came was very vital, very important. So knowing that, his last words before his ascension into heaven, that they were going to be pretty important. Wouldn't you agree with that? Spending all that time, in ministry and the miracles he did and dying on the cross and being raised again, his departing words are going to be important. It wasn't just, oh yeah, see you later, alligator. I don't know how many of you remember that old saying. It wasn't like, well, it's been real, but got to go. But he gave some really important directions. We spend so much time thinking about, and as we should, because Jesus dying on the cross and being raised to life is the whole basis of our faith. But we don't really sometimes stop to think about the time after the resurrection until his ascension. He spent 40 days, talking and teaching and appearing to people. And I like how Acts 1 puts it. It says that he presented himself alive after his suffering with many infallible proofs, being seen by them. And I want to focus on that, them, for a moment. When you go to up to verse 2, it tells you who the them, who they are. It says the chosen. Okay, so imagine being the chosen for just a moment. And you're going to see later how important that word chosen is. Okay, so a little preview, we're all chosen. Okay, so, but imagine being the chosen for just a moment. Maybe you're like, Simon Peter and Andrew, you're casting nets into the sea, and Jesus walks up and says, hey, follow me. What would you do? Would you keep on fishing? Would you keep on just following the family trade? Or would you go off and follow them? Now, it's easy for us to look back and say, well, we got our Bibles. We know the history here. Yeah, of course, I'd go. I mean, that's so simple to say that we would give up the comforts of fishing with Dad and go and follow this guy. It's easy to say that now. But would you really obey his command? If you're alive during the time that they were and you followed him, you would be up close with what was going on. You would see the miracles. You would see him, opening blind eyes, making the deaf ears hear, making the lame to walk, raising people to life. You would witness firsthand the miracles of Jesus. You wouldn't just hear about them. So write this down, because this is what they did. They were serving God. When we serve God, we get to see miracles firsthand. We get to see, salvation is the greatest miracle of all, because that changes eternity. But when we're serving God, the disciples, they got to see first. I mean, just think, we read about that, but they got to see it. If they wouldn't have obeyed, they wouldn't have seen it. They may have heard about it, like, oh yeah, that Jesus dude, that's like, yeah, he told me to follow him, but I was pretty busy fishing, and I just didn't do it. But they got to see it. So when we serve God, we get to see miracles firsthand. So back to the importance of his to the importance of his mission. Mark 16:15, and that's kind of the basis of go. That's where we got the go from. Because as believers, we are all called to go. But Mark 16:15, he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." There's a couple spots where we hear what we call the Great Commission. Go into all the world and make disciples. But it says to go. It doesn't say sit back. Hope people walk into your church. Pastor Andy has a vision to multiply, and he understands that to multiply, we need to go. That word outreach. And you should thank God that you have a pastor who wants to reach out in the community. Because believe it or not, that's not every church. But he says to go, those were those instructions, those important words that he was going to say to them before he takes off and goes back to his heavenly home. He says, go into all the world and preach the gospel. Okay, so and there's so much multiplication that we see going on in the life of Jesus and the disciples and how it all applies to us. So Jesus, think about this. He spent all this time feeding the lives of his disciples. He spent all this time, teaching them, correcting them, rebuking them. And if you read some of the stuff he had to say to his disciples, sometimes there were some pretty harsh words. But there were things that needed to be said. But, he traveled with them, afoot, by boat. He slept under the stars with them. He ate with them. And he didn't just hang around with them and spend time with them because they were good company. He spent time with them and hung around with them, sowed in their lives because they needed to continue his teaching when he was gone, and their learning was a process. Does that word process sound familiar? It should. We've been hearing it every week for the past couple weeks. It was a process. So he had to spend time teaching them because he knew Jesus, that mission he was on. He said, for this to multiply, for this to grow, these guys have to continue it on. And because they continued it on, because they were obedient first to his call, second to what they had to go through to multiply, well, that's why we're sitting here today. I think about that. The stories when he said, hey, put down your nets, come follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. That's why we're here today, because of the work they did. And sometimes we don't stop to think about that, but because they were obedient, because they multiplied, that's why we're here. To me, I think that's pretty cool. But they needed to multiply. They were needed to continue the work that Jesus started and taking that teaching to all the world. Well, guess, if they were needed to multiply, guess who else is needed to multiply? You are. We all are. We're all needed to multiply. I don't think that the series that we're on, I think everybody should be going back and reviewing it, watching it again, taking notes. And I'm sure everybody's been doing that while you're sitting here, but there's so many things that's being taught. It's good stuff. And sometimes it's easy to overlook or forget, but go back and start watching this series again. Encourage other people. Say, hey, go and watch this because there's good stuff, but we've got to multiply. The enemy, he's out there. He's trying to multiply also. And, it's easy to look around society and see, we have disciples of Jesus. We're a little bit more reserved, especially nowadays because, I'm not going to try to get off too far on this, but we kind of got this thing where if we're afraid to, say, hey, sin is sin. Or you need Jesus because then, whatever it may be, oh, well, we're intolerant or we hate people because, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. But we also, we focus so much on what you shouldn't do, but think about the stuff we were singing about today. That's stuff that we can also be sharing. But anyways, we've got to multiply. The enemy's trying to multiply his kingdom. God's trying to multiply his kingdom as well. So going to all the world, let's break that down real quick. Your world, Acts chapter 1:8, that's a good place to see. Because, Jesus said, you receive power and my Holy Spirit comes upon you. You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and all the ends of the earth. So think about the world for a moment. Your world may be Belleview. Okay? It may be Marion County. It may be the state of Florida. Your world, it kind of, do you remember as a kid, like if you ever playing like near a pond or water or maybe even a mud puddle where the water is just kind of still for a little bit? You drop a stone in the middle, what would happen? Ripples. So think about that's how you can look at this great commission, this calling that we all have, is that we drop down that rock and it starts out kind of small. And I spent a lot of time playing in creeks when I was a kid, but I just remember, seeing these, I'd find like a little, still part of the creek and just seeing these ripples just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's kind of really, when you look at multiplication, you look at what the disciples did, and you look at Acts 1:8, That's kind of what we're in the ripple of what started back then. So your world, wherever your world may be, wherever God has positioned you, wherever God leads you, that's your world. And when we think, sometimes when we hear messages like this, we're like, oh my goodness, there's no way I'm going to go to some South American country, or I can't go to Africa and be a missionary, or it's your world. If that's Bellevue, if that's the firehouse, if that's the factory you work in, the school you teach at, wherever you are positioned at, your neighborhood, your family, that's your world. Start making some ripples. Numerically, when we go, I mean, that's just math right there. So when we go into the world, wherever that may be, people hear the word, they come to know Jesus. I suggest, because sometimes people get a little bit nervous when they hear, oh, I got to start telling people about Jesus. Before you even start talking, start showing. Okay, just start loving on people. However that may be, being nicer to someone, maybe there's so many different ways. You hear that word love language. Learn people's love language. Maybe treating them for dinner. There's so many different ways that we can just show people love. Go to their house and help them with repairs. Help them unload a moving truck after a long, long trip. There's so many different ways that we can love people. In fact, that's what Jesus said. Hey, we got to love people. So we increase numerically when we go, because if we don't go, people don't hear. Romans 10:13 through 14 says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And we're like, yeah, that's awesome. That's one of those verses that gets you pumped up, because you're like, oh, everybody who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. You're like, go, Pastor Andy, tell everybody about Jesus. But what about us? It goes on to say, how then can they call on the one who have they not believed in? How can they believe in the one they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And that's New King James, but you can maybe hear that word, instead of the word preaching, maybe you say telling them, showing them. Okay, so how can they believe if everybody who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved? They got to hear it from somebody. And there's a lot of people out there that are not going to walk into a church to hear it. So that's why we have got to go. That's why we got to make some ripples. We also grow individually. We grow spiritually when we go. We multiply. We increase spiritually, because when we go, we're empowered by the Holy Spirit. That Acts 1:8, when it says you receive power. I know everybody's heard probably this definition before, but I love that word power. It's the word dunamis, and that's where we get the root word for dynamite. And if you've ever been up, Kentucky, Tennessee, any place, and you've seen, drive down the interstate and you look over the mountain and you see these lines that is from where they had, drilled boreholes, dropped dynamite and blew it apart. You've seen on TV when they demolish buildings, the power that dynamite can do. It can change a mountain. It can clear the way to make a path to where you can get where you want to go. So you think about what that dunamis power can do in your life. See, that's the awesome thing about God. We sung about Jehovah Jireh, our provider. He's saying, we're going to provide you with the Holy Spirit. In fact, he told the disciples, he said, just wait. Don't go yet, but just wait, because in a few days you're going to receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. And when you read about the disciples, it is unbelievable. But it wasn't just for them to do. That same power is available to us. But we increase, or we grow, we multiply also, because when we go, we should be spending more time in the Word, more time in prayer, getting to hear His voice. We've got to know the voice of God. We've got to be able to discern that. Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd, my sheep will follow my voice. And he said, in fact, they won't follow the voice of the stranger, they will run from it. Okay, so the only way we get to know the voice of God is by spending time with Him. All the distractions of life. I'm a basketball fanatic. Our family, we all love basketball. We jump up, we cheer, we go crazy. This is All-Star weekend. Tonight I'm going to be watching the All-Star game. Watch the festivities last night and the controversy in the slam dunk contest, and but this morning I wanted to get on Hoops Hype, and I wanted to see what people were saying about the controversy. But I'm like, you know what? No, not yet. I want to spend some time with God. So I had to make a little bit of a sacrifice, even though out of habit, I just wanted to grab my phone and look. I said, you know what? That stuff's going to be there this afternoon. So I want to spend some time with God. If we don't spend time with God, we are not going to know His voice.
Yeah, that's good.
I met my wife. Oh my goodness. This fall is going to be, 26 years. Whew, that tells you how old she is. Yeah. We were 26 years. Wow. Yeah, we were babies. Yeah. We were in daycare together when we met. Actually, we were at a Wendy's, and we were raised a little bit differently. My family was a bunch of rednecks. Her family, and not only were we rednecks, but then I was also raised in the ghetto. So you combine the two, I don't even know what that makes. But I would call her house, and they answer. It seems like her last name was BB, B-E-B-E. Seems like y'all probably answered your phone and said the BB residence. I don't know if you really did or not, but it seems like you should have. But it took me a while because I always say, because like I said, we were rednecks, but I'd say, may I speak to Heather? And she's like, this is she. I was like, doggone, that's proper. That is proper. I won't tell the pork chop story. But anyways, do what? You want to hear? Okay, you guys got a couple more minutes? Just the way that people were raised differently. I grew up every Saturday morning, my mom would make pork chops, biscuits and gravy, fried. You had pork chops for breakfast, didn't you? I mean, yeah. And so that was my favorite meal. I go over to her fancy neck of the woods, which was really just over the railroad tracks and down a couple miles. We really didn't live that far apart, but it was like it was far apart. And she said, my mom's making dinner. And I was actually in shape then, but I still loved to eat because I was a teenager. I said, what's she making? She said, pork chops. I said, that's my favorite. And I looked on the stove, and I was confused because it was rice. And I think, was it green beans? And I said, rice and green beans with pork chops? She's like, well, what else do you eat with it? I said, well, biscuits and gravy and fried potatoes. She's like, that's breakfast food. We would eat, biscuits and gravy and pork. We ate breakfast any time of the day, but that was just a little different. So anyways, she was just so proper. I wasn't. And as Pastor Randy would say, I don't even know where I was going with that. But anyways, I got to know her voice because I spent time talking to her. So it went from not being sure if that was her mom or her, because her mom was only 39 years old when we started, but, now she doesn't sound like an old woman like she does now. My mother-in-law, not her. I would say that to my mother-in-law, and she would smack me just because we have fun like that. I have a good mother-in-law. So we got to spend time with God if we want to know His voice. Okay, so those are two ways that we multiply. Now here's the problem with going. Okay, because there are some issues that we face when we go. Okay, number one, it requires obedience. Okay, sometimes obedience may take us someplace where we don't want to go. It may not be the most comfortable position to be in. It may be leaving your family, leaving your friends, leaving a job that you're comfortable with. So that's one of the problems. Another one ties in with that, leaving our comfort zone. I told you I could go take the boys camping as part of my job. We could get out guns and shoot things as part of my job. It was pretty comfortable. But here's another problem with going, is that we have to shut down the lies of the enemy. Okay, because the enemy, he says things like, you're not good enough, you don't know enough. You've messed up too many times, blah, 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 blah. So we have to we have to shut down the voice of the enemy. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, I love it. It says that, even though we live in this world, we don't wage war as the world does. The weapons that we fight with are not weapons of this world, but they possess divine power to demolish strongholds. And it goes on to talk about that we take captive every thought that sets us up against the knowledge of Christ, and we take it captive. It means that we don't dwell on it, we don't think about it. And when those thoughts come in saying, hey, I want you to be part of Go Family Ministries and the outreach at Everyday Church, and I want you to start going out there, I want you to start volunteering in children's ministry or the nursery or wherever you may need to be, and the enemy starts saying, you can't because you're not good enough, you don't know enough, you've messed up in the past, blah, 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 blah. We can say, we can start saying, well, let me tell you, Satan, this is what the Bible says. And we take captive those thoughts. We don't let them marinate in that. Okay, we instantly recognize it's that voice of a stranger, and we run from it, and we get with God. So, and I am going to wrap up here, I promise. Okay, so he called the disciples. And I like that word that says that they immediately left their nets and followed him. But what we see in that, and I think this is what we need to hear. And I know that you've heard people teach this before, but there's a problem with the disciples from the beginning. Because when they called them, they were working with their dad, working in the boat with their father. They were working in the family trade. So that tells us they weren't good enough for somebody else. Somebody else rejected them. For whatever reason, they weren't accepted by another teacher, another rabbi, however you want to phrase it. They weren't good enough. And that guy said, you know what? You're a nice guy, but, go work with your family. But Jesus saw the potential where other people saw a flaw. Okay, they were still called, they answered. Maybe they weren't the greatest orators. I can relate. Another real quick story, when I was a kid, I had a very bad speech impediment. Had several letters I couldn't pronounce, the worst being my S's and my R's. It's kind of a problem when your sister's name's Susan and your other sister's name's Sherry and your last name's McGregor. It's got the S's and the R's. In fact, it was so bad, when I was younger, called my sister Susan, I called her Susie. Sherry, I don't know how you shorten that, but instead of saying Susie and Sherry, I said Louie and Larry. Okay, and multiple times, how many of y'all remember the day and age when you could walk into a store and your parents would go that way, and you could go this way over to the toy department, and you could start looking at all those toys, and you'd see some kid have that hopeful look of anticipation walking down an aisle with toys in his hand, looking both ways, trying to find his parents to say, can I get this toy? Of course, you'd see that kid crying later because their parents said no. But if you got lost, you could go up to the service counter and they would call your parents over the intercom. And this is no joke, and I'm secure enough in my age now to admit that when I was little, they called me Davy. And I would go up and I would say, I was lost, and they would get on the intercom and they would say, can the parents of Davy McGregor come up? That happened multiple times. It's no joke, several times. And I remember when I started taking judo, I remember they thought my name was Davy McGregor also. So I had this issue with how I spoke. And for a long time, I was not comfortable. There's still even words to this day, like the number that comes after 13, when I say that number, to me, it just sounds weird still. So, I'm not the most confident guy when it comes to speaking sometimes. And maybe, you're the same way. Maybe you're like, well, I can relate. I had a speech issue, whatever. But, like I mentioned, we started in ministry 22 years ago. And we started out in youth. It was the church I grew up in. I knew from an early age I was called to ministry as a teenager and young adult. I kind of ran from that. Every time I left the house, I learned after I got saved that my mom thought for a few years there, every time I left, that was the last time she'd see me alive, because I was an idiot. But came to know Christ. Just a couple weeks later, we started helping out in youth. Started out for the first couple months, just kind of crowd control. People were talking, we're like, hey, pay attention, listen. Then we got to do some games, run the soundboard, take an offering, and eventually the day came where Pastor Jimmy, who was my youth pastor, and found out that he didn't like me too much when I was a teenager because I was a bad influence on his little brother. But I remember he said, hey, you want to do a message? I'm like, yeah. Kind of like today. Now Pastor Andy's probably, not again. But he said, you want to do a message? And I said, yeah. So, I wrote out this message, and I was thinking, man, this is going to be like Billy Graham. These kids are going to come running up to the altar. They're going to be crying, sobbing. This is going to be life-changing. It's probably going to be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe even 40 minutes. It's just going to be, I got done probably less than 5 minutes. And remember, I wasn't real confident in how I spoke. And I remember getting done, I was like, oh my gosh, how do I even end this thing? So I said, I'll take some questions. This will get it going. So I said, does anybody have any questions? And this girl named Amanda, I remember where she was sitting. She was sitting to my left, as Pastor Andy said, my left, your right. And she's about 2 rows from the back and about 3 seats in. Amanda raised her hand. And I was thinking, here we go. Oh, this is going to start it right here. And I said, yes, Amanda. And she's like, yeah. She's like, do you know you said 68 times? And I said, let's go play volleyball. And we walked down. I told Heather, I said, I'm never doing this ever again. Because I was not confident in the way I spoke. And one little thing like that, I was ready to quit. Now, I couldn't quit because God had called me. And to quit would have been disobedience. And some other time I'll share maybe just awesome ways that God has orchestrated things that if I would have quit, how things wouldn't have worked. But I'm going to wrap up. Okay, we need to multiply for the kingdom's sake. And I want everybody to look around. And I know we got people that are sick today. So we got a lot of people that are out. But I want everybody to find look at an empty chair. In fact, if I do this with one hand, maybe. And like I said, I know people are sick today because there's new faces all the time, which is awesome. But I want you to look at this chair. And this chair represents a person. That person represents a soul. That soul represents a soul that's either going to live for eternity with God or live in eternity separated from God. I want you to, whenever you see empty chairs in here, and I'm not trying to beat anybody up or make anybody feel guilty, but I want you to look at empty chairs when you see them, and I want you to be offended by that. And don't dare say, well, Pastor Randy should be doing this or that when you see an empty chair. I want you to look at it and say, I need to go. That chair, it could be occupied by my neighbor. That chair could be occupied by my niece. That chair could be occupied by my kid that I let stay home. But these chairs represent eternity. Okay, some people may come to church on their own. But in America, we have put so much focus on the church building versus being the church ourselves. So when you see an empty chair, I want you to think and know that be a motivator for you to go. Everyone's heard Matthew 9:37 and 38. Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And he said, ask the Lord, therefore, to send workers in his harvest field. A lot of times we pray, and I think I heard this here. I know I just heard this recently. A lot of times we pray for God to do something about something that we could do something about. We want God to, hey, you know what, send somebody else to do it. But are you willing to lay down your net? Are you willing to walk away from your own wants, your own desires? And a lot of times, here's the awesome thing. When God calls us to do something, He's not always telling us to pack up and move from Tennessee to Florida. He's not, He may not be giving up your dream home. It may not be giving up a career. It may just be, working on a relationship a little bit differently and loving somebody to where that guy you've been working with, where you can start showing him God's love. But we have to go. We wouldn't be sitting here today if the disciples didn't obey that command. So I want to extend, this is based on a conversation that Pastor Randy and I have had. We have a couple sites that we've been praying about here in Bellevue that we're going to be going to, as a ministry, as a teaming up with Everyday Church. And you may not be comfortable giving a message, but you may be comfortable showing kids how to play a game or just getting up and dancing. Or you might be comfortable helping serve food at an event. You may be comfortable, getting up and, I did a sidewalk Sunday school for many years, and there's this man named Denny. And how many years? 3, 4, 5 years at least that I worked with that. I worked with that team, and Denny was on it. I never once saw him get up and do an illustration. I never saw him lead a game. Of course, this day and age is a little bit different, so you couldn't really do now what he did. But he would sit back on the tarp. It's all gone. And there was kids, pardon me, kids that didn't have dads. And he would sit there and these kids would just sit on his lap. That's all I saw. He'd get up and talk to parents. That's how he would go. So don't think there's something that you can't do anything, because we can all do something. But I would love to have y'all pray about how can we get involved with the outreach here at Everyday Church. Talk to Pastor Randy, or if I have the permission that they can talk to me, or Heather, or whoever. But most importantly, in fact, going back to what God said, that He was going to speak to somebody. And this may be something totally different, but I believe God's calling somebody today. And that's between you and God, but just pray. Say, God, I want to hear your voice. So I'm going to pray, then Pastor Randy.